Mathias Kirchmer, who is an experienced practitioner and thought leader in the field of business process management and digital transformation. He co-founded BPM-D, and before that, he was the managing director and global lead of BPM at Accenture and CEO of the Americas and Japan of IDS Share. Dr. Kirchmer has led numerous transformation and process improvement initiatives in various industries at clients around the world. He has published 11 books and over 150 articles. At the University of Pennsylvania and at Widener University, he has served as an affiliated faculty for over 20 years. He received a research and teaching fellowship from the Japan Society for the Promotion of Science. I will now hand you over to Dr. Kirchmer.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chantal, for that nice introduction. And yeah, welcome everybody to our today's webinar on about business process management, and have a look at it as an emerging management discipline and the impact it provides to get real business value out of digital transformations. And I have structured our session into three major parts. First, some general comments why digital transformation needs process management, and how in general process management adds value in that field. We will then look at some more specific examples of the impact of BPM in digital transformations, and in the last part show how process management also helps to sustain the effects we have achieved in our transformation. The digital transformation is about combining products or services, people, and doing that using digital technologies. That's in a nutshell the definition of digital transformation. But what is important, that the value of those digital transformation is delivered through new and enhanced processes. Just putting some technologies in our companies doesn't really move us forward. Only when we use them to do something better, to do something new, then we get a real value out of it. And that's why it's also not a surprise that industry research from industry analysts has shown that basically all companies who realize the full business potential of digital technologies, they also have a well-defined process management discipline in place. And such a process management discipline was in the past always referred to as a set of methods and tools and all that. But in the last, I would say 5 to 10 years, it has more and more been defined as really the management discipline that moves strategy into people and technology-based execution, and does that fast and reliably. And that's a definition of process management. It's not just a project related topic, but really a discipline that we need in our organization to keep the digitalization and transformation journey going. That is very, very key. And process management does that basically by aligning the organization through the management of our process life cycles, through the design of processes that reflect our strategy, the appropriate implementation and execution of those processes, and then the control to see whether we can live with those processes or we need to do future adjustments. At the end of the day, the key benefit of process management for transformation and for the realization of our enterprise strategy is the transparency it delivers. Business process management provides the visibility in your organization that helps you to take fast but well-informed decisions and set appropriate actions. It helps to mitigate the trade-offs of conflicting goals like quality and efficiency. For example, in a call center process, there are a whole number of steps that a client does not really care about, and there you would optimize it based on efficiency aspects. But then there are certain steps where clients really care about, where they are also ready to pay money for, and there you would optimize based on quality aspects. And the transparency that business process management delivers helps you to address both aspects. Or same with agility and compliance. We want to adjust, but we also have process areas where we have to follow compliance guidelines, where we have to follow our company standards. And again, process management allows you to combine both aspects by identifying where can we give freedom to people to be really agile and react based on current developments, and where we have to follow in a more or less rigid way our compliance standards. That transparency also helps in the collaboration with market partners, so with external networks. It helps aligning people internally towards the goals of the organization, and very importantly, especially in the topic in the field of digital transformation, it helps you to identify where is it really worth to come up with a complete new process, where to be really innovative, but also to see where do we have good practices in place that helped to move our company forward and that we want to conserve. So that balance between innovating where it is important and conserving good existing practices very, very important. Well, then comes, of course, the next question. How do we achieve that? How do we establish such a business process management discipline? And in order to answer that question, we can just take a step back and think about, well, how do we implement any other management discipline, like, for example, human resources? You establish it through the appropriate HR processes, hiring process, promotion process, and so on. And for business process management, as a management discipline, that's exactly the same topic. It's established through what I like to call the process of process management. And we have done quite some intensive research also together with a few academic institutions, and there's about 25 capabilities that you would develop in order to get such a process of process management up and running. But if you look at it from a high level, such a process of process management is about three topics. It's about focus, it's about improve, and it's about sustaining those improvements. The focus part, it's important to know that an organization only competes through about 15 to 20% of their processes. 15 to 20%. And those high impact process areas, it is worth to launch sophisticated optimization, improvement, innovation initiatives that normally pays off. In the 80+% of commodity processes, it's completely okay to standardize based on industry best practices. That can still mean that you have to improve what you do, because you may not be on an industry average performance level. That also may still need you go through some digitalization efforts. However, you benefit from what is already existing in the market, and don't have the ambition to get better than your competition. You focus your work and your creativity on the 15 to 20% high impact processes, and business process management helps you to identify those. Then, of course, we need to improve our processes through our digitalization, and their process management helps in two ways. On one hand, by providing the end-to-end view on our processes, so that we don't fix something in one area and create issues in other fields, and that we really identify where the improvement opportunities are, and how do we best touch that process. Is it really an automation requirement, or can we make progress through just some organizational changes? How do we best mix technology and organizational adjustments? All those questions need to be answered through an appropriate process management discipline. And once we have our improved processes in place, of course, things keep on moving. We need to make sure that we keep those processes on track, and that we keep on benefiting from the benefits we have achieved, and take the decision for another improvement or transformation initiative when this is required. So the process of process management is all about focus, about improve in a context, and about sustaining those improvements. Now let's have a look what that process management discipline can help with, and how that looks like in a digital transformation. And as mentioned, in a first step, it's about setting the right focus of our digital initiatives, or of our transformation initiatives in general. And that can be done through a process impact assessment. And the process impact assessment does two things. It, on one hand, identifies what are the high impact processes in our organization, and which of those have a low maturity level, so that it's really important to touch them. And once that is defined, you can really then define the scope of your transformation in a way that it delivers most of the value, and really focuses on the areas that your organization needs to transform to move to the next level. Basis of that process impact assessment is the transfer of your strategic direction into more operational value drivers. Those operational value drivers are then linked to the different business processes, and for every process it's defined which impact does it have on which value drivers, so that you then can identify the overall impact of your business process, and with that identify your high impact processes as core for your further transformation. In many of those business process transformations and digitalization initiatives, the first phase is less about optimization of all our processes, but about standardizing processes to the right level across different business units. And that makes a big sense, because if every unit works differently, it's basically impossible to come up with a consistent digitalization strategy, and you will never be really agile, because it will always take too long to adjust the whole organization. I can say that in the last, I would say, 6 to 10 years, I receive even more requests for process standardization initiatives than for pure improvement projects. And those standardization initiatives can very well be supported through business process management, and a good tool to do that is the use of so-called process reference models. Reference models in a digitalization context show how you would organize and execute a process in a special business domain, for example, our procure-to-pay process, and how that process can be enabled through a specific automation platform, for example, a special system. And the reference model shows how that is done in a general way. So it basically visualizes the impact of a digital technology on on a business process, and in the first step you would then adjust it to your specific organization, showing which parts of that process do not really matter for us. You cross them out. There are additional steps that we need to take in our organization, so that you come up with a company specific reference model. And in that company specific reference model, you then mark where are the parts of that reference process that can be adjusted in different business units, for example, due to different channels that are supported, to different products, to different legal requirements in different states or different countries, and where are process areas that we really require to be the same across business units, so that you can use such a reference model to manage an appropriate standardization, or better, even to talk about a process harmonization that puts the standard wherever that is possible, but is also aware of the fact that we need to adjust in certain areas to a specific process variants. So using such reference models to manage process standardization, very, very powerful impact of business process management. We were talking before about the need for innovation and the opportunity for innovation through such a digital transformation. And this is also an area where business process management plays an important role. It can, for example, operationalize techniques like design thinking. Design thinking is about empathy, it's about transfer of practices from one field into another one, it's about agility to achieve quick benefits, and it's about storytelling to create the right mindset. And business process management helps in all of those areas. The use of stakeholder journey maps like customer journey maps or supplier journey maps or employee journey maps help to have an outside-in look at your processes and identify what is the current experience of our stakeholders, what is the desired experience of our stakeholders, and how to make that happen. The use of the reference models I just mentioned help to transfer good and successful practices from one business field into another. For example, in a biotech company that has to configure the final products to order to have patient-specific medication, can leverage some of the process know-how from the machinery industry where machines are configured to order. And with that achieve a significant innovation. The definition of process scenarios, how to move from one step to the other, supports an agile approach so that we achieve quick benefits, but also set the right expectations. And by embedding our process work into an overall operating model and show what kind of which processes we currently address and how they interact with others, help to tell the right story, why we do it, how we will change the organization, and with that creates the right mindset in our company. So business process management, very important enabler of the use of design thinking, and especially that topic around stakeholder journey maps is something more and more used. And here I have to say that it's key to really have an approach, what I call integrated journey planning. That means I look, of course, at my stakeholder experience, like, for example, my customer journey map and the different touch points that my customer has with the organization. But then I link that to the underlying processes so that I know how do I have to adjust those processes to really improve that customer experience. So that integration between stakeholder journey mapping and the underlying processes helps to come up with the right actions to improve that customer or other stakeholder experience. For example, in a large consumer retail organization, popped up issues with in the pricing areas, lots of discussions, and it turned out that depending on the channel that a customer used, there were different pricing engines involved that could lead to different prices. So the analysis of the processes allowed to exactly identify where the issue for a bad experience come from and how to fix it in a pretty straightforward way. When we design our processes, our to-be processes, how we are going to work in the future, and have an idea about how we work today, then of course we wanna really know, is it worth to go that way? Is it really paying off? Do I need my business case through that journey? And that's why process management also helps to quantify that benefits that a move to a new situation, to a to-be process would bring. And a way to do that is the use of simple and pragmatic simulation techniques, and I stress the point simple and pragmatic, because if you try to make the simulation a science, that can be a never-ending story. But if you do that in a pragmatic way, that you collect your cost and time and attributes, for example, as a byproduct in as-is interviews, then you come up with process models that really tell you a story about what the financial impacts of your transformation journey will be. Like here in that example from a big major insurance company, where in a small product area, we did a first pilot and could show that for the underwriter processes to move from the as-is to the to-be would be a huge saving of costs of almost 50%, combined with the scalability effect of factor 9. And when we did that simulation company in that organization, people were first a bit skeptical. So they decided just to implement it in one product area to see how the outcomes were. And as a matter of fact, the reality was then very, very close to what was predicted to the simulation, so that the approach got rolled out across the whole organization. So that simulation of processes to get quantitative information, very important to justify especially larger transformation initiatives. And those process models that we have created to define where we want to go in the future and to understand how we work today, they are the key to align business and technology during the transformation. Because those models, those to-be models, basically, on one hand, reflect the capabilities of our technology, but on the other hand, they then show how we want to use that technology in our organization, so how to configure the system. And on the other hand, the comparison between the as-is and the to-be gives us a great input for our people change management, so for our information, communication, and training. And here, modern process management and repository tools let you then compare those process models, so that you can see, well, where are steps eliminated, where do we have to do some new steps that we haven't been doing today, and where are modifications of activities, so that it's a very good basis to plan for the change management, to have an idea how the size of the change will look like, and how it impacts the people. And that people aspect I cannot stress enough in digital transformation. That is often a bit underestimated. But even if you now try to automate many of your activities, for example, through RPA, robotic process automation, you need to see that this means for people that they now have to focus on handling the exceptions. So the work gets much more difficult because all the simple transactional work is gone now. So to prepare people for that and train them accordingly and inform them upfront and get their input is very, very key. And process management helps to facilitate this communication and helps to avoid misunderstandings or to forget important aspects. And once we are then live with our new processes, we want to, of course, see if we really achieve the value, and their process management can help again, for example, through process mining techniques. That means that you get information about your new digital processes, and you get that information really in the performance information about your processes in the context of your processes, so that you know, for example, not just how long does your procure to pay process take, but how long does it take from the point that I enter a purchase requisition till it's approved, till the order is at the client, and so on. So you get detailed information about whether you achieve your goal. But very importantly, you get also detailed conformance information. How well do we follow our process? So that we see two things. Do we really meet our performance goals, so that we realize our business case? And second, do we follow our to-be process? And well, if we don't follow our to-be process and we don't meet our performance goals, we already have a clear idea what to do. We have to really figure out why certain steps are not executed. And just had there a very interesting case where we could show in a maintenance area that over 3 months, the number of variants, so where we didn't follow our to-be process, basically went back from month to month very significantly, 30, 30, 40%. That showed, okay, we are on a good way to really standardize our processes and move towards our to-be. We could also show that the 11% of processes that still have variants, we could show that these are the maintenance process where some specific equipment numbers were not assigned to our maintenance orders, which led to additional time. And exactly in those cases, the cycle time of our maintenance work was much longer than in other cases. So we had a very clear action to look at, and could even see that it was in certain locations. So we could address that through appropriate training and move things into the right direction. So the use of process mining to drive the value realization after our processes are, our digital processes are in place, is very, very powerful. And I really think there is a big trend in this direction. Having said that, I very well know also that it's often discussed, well, that a whole mining topic could be also the way to start with. Why should we do here the traditional as-is interviews to get the transparency over what we work today? Why not just do the mining right away? And I have to say there are situations where that works, especially when the as-is process is already well supported through IT systems, so that I have the information available. But in most of the cases, that does not really work, because many steps of the processes, people use spreadsheets, they use manual documents, and through that mining approach for the as-is capturing, you would lose a lot of information, which causes, of course, a major issue. And second, you would create the integration and the adapters to load the data in just for that as-is analysis, and then you basically throw them away, so that the time you and effort you gain is also not as big. So you invest and you don't get real solid and a real good result out of it. That's why in most of the cases we use that mining approach for the value realization and the ongoing governance of our processes, but for the initial capturing of the processes, the more traditional way through interviews, which can nowadays be done here in remote interviews online, so very efficiently. But we saw now that process management can help in digital transformations, really from the first point of targeting values, setting the right priorities through the standardization, the innovation, the automation of our processes, and then the value realization. And that's a good transition into our last topic, the sustainment of those improvements. And when we talk about sustaining those processes, there's one very important aspect. You see, in digital transformations, there is a very big trend that more and more of the technology itself moves outside the organization, moves into the cloud. What stays in our company are the business processes. So the real asset in the organization is not the technology itself, but the way we use that technology to really achieve a business value. So to make our business processes tangible and manageable, and to have a discipline around that, just as we have a discipline about the technology, IT, we need now also the discipline about our processes to really treat them as assets and make sure that we really don't miss anything and get best value of our cloud-based technologies. And in order to do that, it is required to have also a bit of a structure around that and to organize our process management discipline. And that's in one hand, of course, to have the right roles in place, the process sponsor, process owner, process steward, the center of excellence with transformation or BPM lead, or I like also to refer to them as the chief process officer. And there it's not enough just to identify those roles and have a brief role description, but it's important to have really the underlying processes. How do they really act? How do they govern processes? How do they interact with the rest of the business? And in most of the cases, those governance roles are part of the business, but spend their time mainly on looking across organizational boundaries. And the center of excellence, the core organization, basically helps to sees them as their clients and helps to prepare and execute the related transformation project, provides the standards, guidelines, and the necessary tools. And that such a governance organization works, we need, as we saw before, also a set of tools. So the BPM discipline itself also needs to be digital and digitalized in the right way. And a simple architecture of the tools that you need for an working process management discipline is shown here, and you need on one hand a way to set the top-down direction, and that happens through an appropriate process modeling and repository approach. And on the other hand, you need to know, well, do we really follow our processes? How well are we doing? So you need a bottom-up control, and that happens through a business process monitoring approach. And of course, we need then the execution environment on the top with an automation platform, and then there's all kind of digital tools integrated to that. And in order to keep on checking our priorities, it's also recommended to have some tools to identify the impact of our processes and how that changes, as well as the maturity of our processes compared to the industry. And I know there is often that discussion about, do we need modeling and mining, or do we only need one of both? But as I explained before, my very strong belief is that you need both. You need the modeling really to set your top-down direction and to understand and visualize processes that are not or very little automated. And you need your process mining to make the governance and the control of the digital processes much more efficient. So both areas complement each other. So both should be part of the system architecture supporting our process management. And to make sure that we can really seamlessly roll out that process management discipline, make it part of the way we work in our organization. We have seen it as very practical to have something in place that we like to refer to as a BPM playbook that is related to our process of process management. That is, of course, defined in process repository, just as any other business process. But that BPM playbook is basically something like the standard operating procedures for your process of process management, defines the modeling description standards, but also describes how an improvement initiative is organized, describes the governance approach, and so that's your process management discipline really can be rolled out and applied across the organization. And with that, we are basically at the end of that short presentation. We have seen that processes realize at the end of the day the value of our digital transformation. In order to get best value out of your transformation, it's important to set the right priorities, and process management helps here through our process impact assessment. During the transformation, it is about standardizing, innovating, automating, and that needs to be value driven. So in the areas where we really get most out of it, and data-based. We want to know through appropriate simulation and quantitative techniques that we really go the right way. And once we went through the digital transformation, we need to make sure that we have an environment in place that provides the appropriate governance and basically keeps that process of process management up and running. And there, of course, the right enabling tools play a key role. And at the end of the day, you basically establish then a business process management as a management discipline that keeps your transformation and digitalization journey going. Thank you very much.
Okay, so if we're ready, we can move over to the Q&A, and I've got a couple of questions here for you, Mathias. The first one that I've got is, do you recommend any specific tools to run simulations?
So my recommendation is to use the tools that you also use for your process modeling, so that you have everything in one environment. And there's of course many process modeling and repository tools in the market. I see as the leading ones here, of course, Aries from Software AG, but also Signavio from SAP, and there are many more that really work. But I would always recommend to do the simulation in the same tool you also do the modeling.
Great. So our next question is BPM-N 2.0 modeling a mandatory step in the methodology to automate the process?
Can you please repeat it? I couldn't hear you correctly.
Sorry, let me just speak louder. Okay, is the BPM-N 2.0 modeling a mandatory step in the methodology to automate a process?
That's an interesting question. I would say it's not mandatory, but it is highly recommended. And the reason therefore is that in BPM-N 2.0 diagrams, you have a very systematic description of the process itself, but also of the way that a process is supported through technology. And you have even the possibility to break that wider down and even describe then technology-specific aspects. So the use of BPM-N 2.0 really is in the meantime really the communication and description standard for business processes, and I would highly recommend using that.
Great, thanks for that answer. How can an organization begin to develop their own BPM playbook?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And let me answer that in a few steps. First, I clearly have to say such a BPM playbook is never finished. It's a living document that is always updated. I would start, like with every BPM initiative, in those areas where you have the biggest needs. Let me give you some examples. If you start with a huge initiative where you need to create process models, then it may be a good start to define your modeling standards and guidelines first, and then add the other components over time. If you are in a phase that you say, okay, we need to put our process governance in place, and our process owners don't exactly know how to work, they need more guidance, then you may start with defining your governance process and then adding the chapter in the playbook about how you organize your governance. So I would start the playbook always in the context of the specific topics.
And how would you incorporate process discovery?
Yeah, so again, that is a point that is often discussed. Do I need to do process discovery? Can I? Why can I not right away define my to-be and ignore that? My very strong belief is that you need to at least roughly understand your as-is processes if you want to transform them. because only that understanding gives you hints how big the transformation is. It gives you hints what kind of people are affected in which way. It gives you the information that you need for your business case. There's plenty of reasons to do that. And then, of course, logically, you would do that at the very beginning of your initiative. And there, I have to say, in the past, that was often a very, very time-consuming process where you had to go to many locations and interview then all the people. Nowadays, that you can do that all in online sessions, we made the experience that this can be very, very efficient. If you just basically have in an online session two people, one asking the question, the other one develops right away the BPM-N 2.0 model in the interview so that you can review that and have right away a basis and then share that later on for verifications. That goes very efficiently. So I recommend doing that as is capturing and doing it as a first step of such a transformation initiative after the prioritization.
Great. Okay. How much does the IT tool impact the process definition?
I'm not sure if I understand the question correctly. I can say that the tool should not impact the process definition itself, because that's guided through the content. However, it impacts the efficiency of the process definition, and that efficiency depends basically on the usability of the tool. You see, if you want to capture in a transformation a larger amount of business processes with the drawing tool, then it will be a nightmare because you will it takes too long to create the graphics. It's ways too difficult to update and change them. So the use of a real professional modeling and repository tool makes it just more efficient to create those process definition, but it does not really influence the content itself.
Is there any standard or BDP of governance models, not only the modeling language?
I don't know a standard of process governance models. There is some broad agreement on certain roles, like the ones I mentioned about the process owner, process sponsor, process steward. But the entire governance model and the underlying governance processes, I have not seen a standard template for that. And to be honest, I also have my doubts if that would be if that is possible to define that independent of the specific organization, because that governance has to reflect somehow the culture and the structure of your current organization. And that's why it will always need to be company specific. However, to have such reference models as starting points is clearly a good way to launch the journey. But up to now, I only know those references from specific consulting companies. I have not seen cross-industry standards.
Okay, our next question is, transparency is a key in BPM, it seems. What if a company is not comfortable in sharing their key core processes to all staff, even if it had been developed? Is there a risk that an outsider may copy?
Yeah, that's a very good question. You know, when I moved to the States from Germany 27 years ago, I had a discussion with a professor at Penn, and he told me, okay, I like your process things, but you should not talk here too much about transparency. American companies and their executives don't like that topic. They don't want to be transparent and show what's going on. So said I wouldn't stress that point if you want to sell those services, and I followed his advice. But that situation had changed dramatically here after the financial crisis in 2008 and all the following compliance requirements. So that was much better. And the way that the topic then about making those processes tangible, and with that also having the risk that somebody steals them. Of course, there is a risk, but the risk that if you don't document them and therefore you cannot manage them systematically and you cannot conserve them systematically is much, much higher. And that's why creating that transparency and making it tangible will bring much more benefits than risks.
Okay, so our next question is, what are the best practices to model when you need to visualize differences between regions, markets, etc.? They say, meaning the same process is done differently between regions and need to see this in the same model.
Yeah. So there's to model those regional differences, there's two aspects. There's on one hand the as-is processes, and there I would just go very straightforward, model the processes of each region separately in different process models, so that you can compare where are differences, where are similarities. That's the easiest. When it comes then to the design of the to-be process, then I would always go the way I briefly described in the presentation, to create a company-specific reference model and show them, okay, this is the part of the process that should be the same in all regions, and then for specific areas like how you improve something or how you interact with your clients, you make a suggestion that is something like a common practice, but you mark it in your reference model that this can be changed individually to the different region, and good modeling tools even allow you then to have a variance of those processes and show how those process components look different in different locations. So for the to-be, I would have one model and show where variance can be, and then just document the variance per location.
Thanks for that, Matthias. We've got another one where it says that we are operating a trading floor of 10 to 12 people that buys and sells 100 aircraft per year. Does this process work for a small company, or are they too small?
Can you please repeat it? It's very difficult to hear you.
Yes. Okay, we are operating a trading floor of 10 to 12 people that buys and sells 100 aircraft per year. Are we too small? Does it work for a small company?
That's a very good question. I'm often asked that, and I can say the approach I described, the smallest company we have done that with was a 30 people company, and there we had was a research institute, and through that initiative we could increase their throughput by a factor 10. So a huge effect, and therefore my clear answer is also small and medium companies benefit heavily from process management, and by my opinion and experience, it's even a much easier start because capturing a process is easier. You have to interview less people. Then once you identify improvement opportunities, taking the decisions to do something goes much faster since you have shorter ways in smaller organizations. So I can only recommend also to small and medium companies to use that, but having said that, use it in a pragmatic way. Don't get lost in tools and techniques. Think clearly what you want to get out of it, and use then the underlying tools in a pragmatic way.
Okay, what are the differences between low-code and RPA automation? Which one is better suited to BPM standards?
In a process management and a process-driven approach helps you to identify the right technologies to realize the improvement opportunities that you identify in your process. And RPA, robotic process automation, basically helps you to automate single steps where people have to do to enter manually information or move it from one system to the other, and basically automate one step in your process. Whereas such a no-code platform, they have on one hand an workflow component. That means it helps you route the information through your process, and it allows you to support specific steps by creating appropriate functionality. And one step in this automation environment could then also be supported through an RPA tool. So I would see RPA and a no-code platform as very complementary and not as a contradiction. Having said that, there is often many short-term RPA use cases that on the longer terms through a more stringent automation approach can be replaced by just a more integrated automation, for example, through such a platform. But there's also always steps remaining, for example, where you have to enter physical information that comes from clients or from somewhere external, where RPA then plays a role as part of the overall platform.
Okay, when working in an agile environment, is it necessary to identify the business value upfront, or can it be done with each iteration?
To identify what upfront? I couldn't.
Is it necessary to identify the business value upfront?
I think it's always recommended to identify the business value upfront. However, I would recommend to have then also process scenarios, as I briefly mentioned in the presentation. You see, if you have an agile approach, you may not move from your current situation to the optimal one, but you have different steps in between. And for the steps in between, you need to set the right expectation so that people know what can they expect to get out of that. So you would address the value in two or several steps too. You would have a rough estimation. What is the end value? Why do we go that route? And then you would have a more detailed value analysis for every iteration in your agile approach that you do, so that you can also take an informed decision whether it's worth to go another step forward or to stop. And to give you a very practical example, when you implement somewhere RPA, then at the beginning you may only handle some of the simpler cases through your RPA, so there's a relatively high amount in exceptions that are handled manually. And then you can of course refine that RPA and the rules in your bot so that you can handle more also of the exception cases. But whether that is worth doing or not really depends on the economics and on the business impact that brings. So to have then something like a value analysis before taking that step is really important, so that you don't create something that doesn't justify the investment.
Our company is starting to document its process. Being tasked to do so, I need to educate the whole team of what I will be doing as I write the as-is process and tell them what will happen next and what the company is trying to achieve. Should the stakeholder or sponsor do this instead of me, since I'm only a process owner myself who knows BPM is done?
It's really, I'm so sorry, Chantal, I cannot hear you clearly.
Okay, let me try again. Our company is starting to document its processes. Being tasked to do so, I need to educate the whole team of what I will be doing as I write the as-is process and tell the team what happens next and what the company is trying to achieve. Should the stakeholder or sponsor do this instead of me, as I'm only a process owner myself who knows BPM is done?
Yeah, a very good question. I recommend to do it in two steps. On one hand, the overall process sponsor or owner needs to set the stage and explain from a top level why do we go through this transformation, and why do we need to understand how we work today, and how do we define how we work in the future, and how do we then implement that so that people understand the overall story. And then in the second step, here the process owner or whoever conducts those capture interviews can explain the details. And there, I think it's very important that people understand how that is documented. So get a brief introduction, the method that is used, understand how the interviews are done and what is expected from them, so that that we don't create an unnecessary anxiety. So I would use both voices on different levels.
Okay, my next question is, how much does an outside compliance need impact the push towards BPM? Example, ISO 9001, ISO 13458, etc.
Yeah, such external compliance requirements are often the trigger for a process management initiative. But then this creates the opportunity to take a step back and look at things in a bit of broader way, so that you don't just create an documentation to get your ISO certification, but do that in a way and in a format that you can use the same process models for your improvement opportunities, that you can use them to explain new employees how you work, that you can use them for quality purposes, and there's many use cases for that. So I would see that as a trigger point, but then to get the full value out of BPM, put it in a bit bigger picture. And it does not mean that you need to do right away much more, but you would slightly adjust the way how you do things so that you create a foundation for future broader BPM work in different areas.
Great. And I have one more question here. I'm not sure if I understand this question correctly, but it says, what are your business process impact source framework origin to speed up the process identification in an illiterate company to processes?
Yeah, that's a process impact assessment to identify our high impact and then our low maturity processes. The mechanics are in principle very, very simple. You just create a matrix where on one side you have a list of your processes, should be on a certain level of detail, and I could explain that more, or you can check out one of our white papers, but you have on one side the processes, and on the other side of the matrix you have your key value drivers and your weights, and then you define for every process what is the impact on every value driver. Is it high, medium, or low? And then you can calculate the weighted total for all of your for each of your processes, and with that basically calculate the impact of the process on the set of value drivers that you have that represent your strategy. And that is really, from a mechanics point of view, a very simple exercise. And that is something that also helps to align the key stakeholder, the key stakeholders behind the transformation initiative, and make sure that we all have the same ideas, what is really important, and which processes really influence that. So the mechanism itself is pretty straightforward. We have a white paper out there on our webpage. It's called Targeting Value, and another one, Prioritization of Processes and Projects, that describes that also more in detail.
Cool. So I have no more questions on my side.
Perfect. Okay, then, yeah, thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate here so many questions. That was really great. And if you have more questions in the future, please feel free to reach out. Always glad to talk. Thank you very much.